Despite DreamWorks' reboot of the popular 80s cartoon She-Ra releasing back in November 2018, I only just found time to watch it, and not to my surprise it lived up to all the bubblingly positive reviews I'd heard around the web. With long experienced and talented writers like Noelle Stevenson and gang on board, it's easy to imagine how they weaved the artistic beauty of the original story and characters.
You cannot escape!
How does it feel being wrong so often, Scorpia?
Into something excitingly fresh, emotionally complex, and downright fun to watch. As reviews go, I'll be going over my favorite aspects of the first season, along with criticisms and hopes for the next batch of episodes which will be released in just a few days. The 13 episodes aired so far follow the life of Adora as she leaves the Horde, the institute that raised her from childhood, after she finds out how much destruction they're causing to innocent civilians. In the process, she makes two new friends, Glimmer and Bow, who help show her the ropes of the outside world, along with helping her master her cool new sword transformation powers which she uses to aid the rebellion. Together they work to form an alliance between neighboring kingdoms and their guardian princesses, forming a unified defense against Horde attacks, but doing so severs her lifelong bond with Catra, who attempts to thwart her progress and persuade her to come back to her old home. Things get increasingly dicey as the tensions between the opposing sides increase, and characters are forced to make difficult decisions for the good of themselves, their friends, and their people. First off, I wanted to talk about how the show fits into the current environmental flavor of animation. It's hard to tell how long we should keep being inspired by it until we should stop using Avatar as a basis for evaluation of show quality, but from the point of a critic and with the fondness of its memory in so many of our minds, it's hard to ignore how pervasively it influenced the modern field of entertainment, specifically in its spiritual offspring. Alas, some were unfairly set up against its predecessors' expectations, but riddled with flaws, yet still able to show improvement. Some started off on a high note before taking a long and hard tumble, some are kind of wonky and a little try-hard but still pretty enjoyable, and some are absolutely fantastic. Through extensive, long-winded research, I've been trying to find the line between tainting a series with oversaturated hype and unrealistic comparisons, and the hidden curse that makes each one of the aforementioned fall short in some major way. So no, I'm not going to say that She-Ra is the next Avatar or the new best show or anything disproportionate like that, but I will say that it came the closest to fulfilling that longing chunk of soul left inside each of us who watched it. And it's not even because it's schematically or visually similar, it's because it follows the same three basic components that make multiple season, kid-friendly action-adventure stories satisfying. The first of those is essential: the underlying harmonic relationship between yin and yang, dark and light, humor and grit. That is to say, the beautiful balance of memes and edge. Usually the best way of achieving this is through split story arcs, aka having two main groups of protagonists that follow interwoven plotlines. This way you can switch between heavier subjects and more lighthearted scenes with relative ease and minimal cognitive whiplash. In She-Ra's instance, this is primarily the case with the Best Friend Squad and the Super Pal Trio, each of which has their fair share of budding angst and rowdy shenanigans. Maybe after they became the main inspiration for cartoons, I've become a little jaded towards the grand, world-saving, apocalyptic stakes teenage escapade genre, because lately I've actually found myself drawn more towards simpler, more comedy-based premises where emotional vulnerability is more of a rare gem. But that didn't stop me from enjoying She-Ra, given as the character interactions are absolutely goddamn hilarious and a treat to watch. Which leads to the second core element: characters. There's so many unique personalities that I've never seen explored before in this show, and the way they bounce off and blend with each other is ecstatic. Trying to explain it here wouldn't do it justice. It's something you've gotta watch for yourself to really feel. There's not a single moment I'm not happy to have someone on screen, and the rarer characters' appearances are like opening presents on birthdays. On the other hand, of course, characters need to be fleshed out and develop over the course of the series, something this one has no shortage of. It's already really interesting to see the individual problems and worries of each character and how they impact their decision-making. One I've particularly liked watching was the relation between Glimmer and her mother, a typical over-controlling parent versus rebellious teen scenario, except with a royal lineage, multiple kingdoms, and an entire world of people under attack by a rampaging horde at stake, which still defies the odds and leaves room for earnest love and care. It's a nice take on how parents sometimes project their own flaws onto their children, making them self-conscious and berating without even realizing, and Angela is a great example on how to recognize that behavior and work together to heal it. If there's a way I think this area is lacking, I'd say that maybe it was a bit steadfast in how soon it got to exploring it. The grim echoes of past trauma and future pressure are entirely relatable and make for great storytelling, and the struggle between friendship and self-improvement this pair share is really touching and tragic. It's amazingly written as it is, but could be even better with some build-up, like an appetizer before you get to the good stuff. While I'm aware there's heavier stuff to come, Adora's story starts at the midpoint, after her shaping childhood and before her soul-crushing journey as a world savior figure, which is appropriate thematically but leaves me a little empty when I don't know that much about her. And although her mysterious past is an important aspect in this situation, more on that later, I feel like she needs just a little more bulk before her overwhelming guilt about her actions and responsibility over the safety of Etheria become the inspiring tales of self-discovery and improvement they're destined to be. As you'll see, most of my critiques with She-Ra are things that can, and I'm sure to some extent will be touched on in the further upcoming seasons. So this isn't a deal breaker of any kind for me, I'm just excited for more content. The only thing I can think of that I really wish was given more time is the dynamic between Adora and her foster mother, Shadow Weaver. It's an openly abusive and manipulative one, but there's an element of subtlety in it, in that Shadow Weaver covers up her dastardly behavior under a thin guise of affection and approval for Adora. Catra, having received the sharper end of the stick since childhood, wised up to these tactics a long time ago, but Adora only really seems to fully confront it when she's exposed to the reality of the cruelty of the Horde. She obviously noticed it and even tried to stand up to it beforehand, but I'd love to know how she felt about it. As someone lacking any other mother figure, did she let herself fall victim to the headbats and cheek brushes? Was there ever a time when she believed Shadow Weaver loved her, or did she know she was lying all along? What made her so afraid to stand up to her, as opposed to Catra's constant efforts to fight against her? Was it the promise of Force Captain, the fear, the mind games, or something else? Things like these would make their eventual confrontation a lot more impactful. Shadow Weaver herself could have been improved too, not just as a character, but as a villain. If she wanted so badly for Adora to think highly of her and stay with her in the Horde, her blatantly evil and violent attacks on her seem a little out of line with her goals. With the kind of abuse they're trying to portray here, I think a slower, more sneaky approach would have been cool to see, as it would be more true to how these things play out in real life. Last on the list is something that can easily be the most exciting part of any show. So far, we only know a small amount about the world of Etheria, namely about the first ones who colonized it, which a huge amount of mystery still revolves around, particularly with Adora's connection to them. We know of several kingdoms, but only a pinch of their history, culture, and involvement with each other. And then there's the world outside of Palace Walls, which only got a brief glimpse in the first few episodes. This may sound like a negative, but it's actually pretty thrilling. There's so much potential here, so many cracks and crevices for the writers to pour their creative ingenuity into, and maybe even room for a shiny new take on the fantasy genre and world-saving plots as we know them. The fun thing about cartoons is that every cluster of them is inspired by those that came before it, and in a way that makes them constantly one-up the previous generation in terms of the stories they're capable of telling, and the dramatic and innovative heights they reach. Given that the writers have commented on how comparatively tame the first season is to the rest they have prepared, I think it's safe to say we're in for a big ride. The mystery of what comes next has me hooked on seeing it through to the end. Even so, there are a few things I'm hoping for in the next batch of episodes. I'll talk about those in part 2. It's great to see 2D animation being utilized for creative world building again. Not to mention how stunningly beautiful this show is, from its choice color palettes and character designs, to its intricately detailed background shots and environmental structures. And I'm not just saying that because I have a weakness for pastels, hopefully. It may not be the most invigorating animation ever, but the individual gestures, motions, and poses that the characters make, even in the most uneventful of scenes, are so fun to watch, and the art style leaves plenty of room for exaggerated and hilarious facial expressions, something cartoons are perfect for, but haven't been taking as much advantage of lately. Even if She-Ra encounters a few hiccups along the way, which I think is a healthy assumption to take up to avoid the classic overly hyped cartoon disappointment syndrome, it's already proven to be a funny, charming, and tonally mature piece of entertainment, with a whole new generation of writers waiting to wow us with their ideas. Thank you so much for watching, make sure to check out my other videos if you're interested, and leave a comment with any of your favorite parts of the show.